on the floor, it's a reproduction. If it's not on the ground, it's original. Like the upholstery on that thing is real. But one of the things about the Bixby's that it's always fascinated me was they had a very different relationship with their workers from what it typically was in early 20th century agribusiness. They were very, very close to their workers. So most of this were gifts from their workers.
Oh.
The chairs, this used to be an altar, the drawings, even that, although that came from Africa.
Oh. Wow.
But one of my favorites here is this mirror. Now, Fred again was John and Susan's son, and he and his wife, Florence, moved in here in 1906, but I believe this thing goes back to the 1890s when Fred was helping his mom. And the problem is when they brought it in, it didn't fit, it was too high. So I knocked out the top of her head. That's a true story. And lo and behold, it fit.
Yeah.
Another thing I want you to do, I know you're wearing a mask, but bear with me. Pull them down a little and smell the air. Can you smell it? Kind of a sweet smell? Almost herbal? Okay. What that is, and again, this is part of the authenticity. The rancher found out what Fred's favorite men's cologne was and Florence's favorite perfume and bought a swimming pool's worth of it. And so most days before he opened to the public, go and they dab them on all the light bulbs in the house. So this is literally what it smelled like in 1933.
Wow.
And this is their bedroom. And that's one of Florence's furs. And there's a robes I can't take it because it's one of the most interesting rooms, but oh well. It's a huge bed for the time, but Susan had that made for John and, or for Fred and Florence, so Fred could fit into a bed because he's a huge guy. So the far side was where Fred slept and Florence on this side. And that little wooden table there on the side, on the right side, underneath the drawer, you'll find a piece of sandpaper. Because Fred loved to lie in bed and smoke cigars. And that's how he lit his patch. Florence was thrilled about that. And if you look into that far end, see how there's now one of those big thick walls? You see the big thick wall is painted white?
Yes.
Yeah, that is part of the original adobe, but because of the oil money in 1926, they expanded that, and that became Florence's world.
Oh.
And one reason I'm trying to show that to you, but they had a bathroom that in 1906, actually they had 6 jacuzzi spouts put into it, which did not calculate for that time, but they dreamed that one up. And this is another mystery to me, how Fred actually managed to navigate underneath this thing without getting killed, because he was such a huge guy. And I don't see any dents along there, but he survived. And, yes. And again, everything, these are all authentic toys from the 20s and 30s. And these are reproductions, that is not. That probably goes back to around 1910, along with that. But underneath here is a billiard table. And John had that, and because he became very successful, he wanted to get back to Long Beach, so he had that made in New York and shipped out here. And then he hopped in the wagon with the foreman and took it into downtown Long Beach to the YMCA and said, "Here you go." And they said, "No."
No.
Oh. Yeah, John probably said the same thing. All right, young man, do not gamble.
Oh.
Okay. So back went on the wagon and came up here. Now the reason that's significant is that, well, Abel Stearns had introduced things like wooden floors and wooden ceilings. The house when John and Susan moved in, had pretty much gotten run down. and they did a lot of renovation, but practically speaking, this was really the only really good room at that point. And so here comes John and plunks a billiard table in the middle of the only really cool room in the house. I would give anything to know what Susan said. It wasn't pretty, I'm sure, but you'll notice it's still here. But nothing about John too. This is Adobe. And the thing about Adobe is if you want to put in a window, you can't just bash it. It'll shatter like porcelain. But John figured out that if you cantilever it like that, you can do it. And this was the Victorian era with John, and so they like dark stuff, lots of iron, dark wood. Susan still wanted some light in here, because at the time, before they started working on it, there was one window, it was right about here, about that big. And so this is the first window, it came down to here, and Susan was thrilled, and she said, okay, I want 10 more of them, and I want them all to go the way to crown. And he did it. He did it. And so, let there be light? Okay, there was light. And over here, let me show you this. This is the inside of the closet here. If you look up there, those are the original 1804 oak beams. So we are literally still inside that old adobe.
The Adobe.
Yeah. We did a seismic refit of the house about 4 years ago, and I was lucky enough to be allowed to run around there with my camera, and you can actually walk. You don't want to do it, but if you go on the beams, you can actually walk around the outline of the original adobe. It's amazing what you can find out there. But they collected art. This is Chavez Ravine before Dodger Stadium was built. And this was part of Florence's glass collection. Although, again, she didn't travel that much. Most of this came from her friends who would go to Europe or other places and bring them back and say, here you go, Florence. And that's how they came to be here. But let's go back to Susan looking at this thing. And more about these presents in a minute. These play a huge role. But John got his billiard table. Susan got this stuff knocked out. Because here we're leaving the adobe. And the original extension, we got roughly here and a little bit to this side. But again, it was a huge accomplishment. Florence, when she came in, this happened. This is the other part of Florence's glass collection. It's just amazing the stuff that's in there. And I've only seen it happen once, but it's usually very early February. If the weather's being okay, the sun comes over the tennis court and hits that bottom shelf there, and for about 5 minutes, this is like being inside a kaleidoscope. And of course, I'm a Florence fan, so I kind of hope she meant that to happen. And John was a musician. Yeah, that's his mandolin. He would invite his buddies to come up and jam.
Wow,
Yeah.
they're so tiny.
Oh yeah.
I'm guessing these were just like for displays, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of a glass collection. Although some of them might have been used for something. But the little tiny cups, I don't think they have leprechauns working for them, but I could be wrong. We have some specialists on the docent team who can tell you every little piece of glass in there. And it just is amazing. Here's more oil money. The originals used to hang here. And these are reproductions. The originals were given with the rest of the household artwork by the kids when they gave up the rancho. And most of it is in the LA County Museum of Art. And this lady has an interesting history. When you were wandering around on the park, did you get to like a little teeny garden all the way out there that has a little circular pool with another one of her standing in it? You might miss it.
By the
It's easy to
chickens?
miss. It's called the Friendly Garden.
Oh no, I don't think
Okay. Well, as the story goes, she used to be out in that garden. And again, as the story goes, one of the members of the Bixby clan was watching the Antique Roadshow? And someone walked in with that. Not that one, but and the guy said, this is amazing, this thing is worth $70,000. And one of the Bixies saw that, and came inside the next day. You know, another naked lady, not worth $70,000, is out there now, but they could collect art. This is also part of the faux foodies. This is called ribbon candy. I grew up with this stuff, and whenever I bring a kid in or kids in here, I tell them this isn't candy. Not candy. It's plaster of Paris. It's acrylic paint. You won't like it. And of course, they all go absolutely. And we're going to go out one of the kitchen drawers that I take them out, and there's a fern right as you step out. Or half the time I find all this plaster of Paris spit out, but they're kids. This is another Florence story. It's a picture she found. It's called The Fancy Hat. And she loved it to pieces, and everyone else in the family hated it. And Fred was really pointed about it, but you'll notice it's still here. So Florence won that one. And here's the Christmas tree. This is where it always was. The kids had chores, and one of the chores that they did on a rotation basis was to stand here and real candles lit the tree.
Oh, that's a lot of candles.
But the idea was, this is full of water, in this case sand, if anything caught, nothing ever caught, but it must have been a boring chore, just stand there all day. Well, as I mentioned, the Bixby's had this really very unusual close relationship with their workers, and this was a big part of it. In early October, Florence and her daughters and the foreman would get around the billiard table, and they'd make out a list of everyone who worked for the Bixby's. Then they divvied the list up, and people rode out to those houses and said, any marriages, any deaths, anything. And they brought it back, but it wasn't a census, it was a Christmas list.
Oh.
And from 1906 to 1930, they had a Christmas Eve party for all of their people. And everyone got something. The kids get toys, mom and dad would get linens, clothes, machines, and stuff like that. And how it worked was this. The kids would sit up front here, and in the back would be the whiskey punch, so the adults